All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to the Alliance Guys podcast. This is a presentation of alliance-wrestling.com, your number one source for news and information for the National Wrestling Alliance. With me is Kevin Douglas, the former NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion. He has been so kind to give us his time. He's actually not a guest anymore. He's an official Alliance guy, and he's going to be on our show for the weeks coming up. And we're here to talk NWA, guys. That's what I'm passionate about. Kevin spent many years representing the NWA as a champion, as a competitor, and we're here just to talk NWA. And, of course, we're going to talk about what happened on this week's pay-per-view. Excuse me, not pay-per-view, but the YouTube show, NWA Power. Kevin, how are you, man?
Man, I'm doing great, and I can't tell you how honored and excited and how much of a privilege it is just to have a chance each week to come out and talk about wrestling. Obviously, coming from the National Wrestling Alliance and spending a lot of the time that I spent in terms of my relevance as a wrestler with the National Wrestling Alliance, it's a lot of fun to get on here and get to talk about it, tell you what I saw during the show, and even every now and then maybe tell you what I think about the state of wrestling as it stands. Because, the NWA is not the only wrestling game in town. And sometimes to get the full picture of what's even happening today, if somebody were to come listen to the show 5 years from now or 10 years from now, maybe give them a little context of what's happening in the whole world of wrestling, as well as the NWA relates to that.
And now, speaking of context, and you and I had some conversation offline, but I really want to just kind of tease the audience here. I know that's an insider. You tease the audience, you give them a little taste of what's to come. The Rock and Roll Express are your new NWA Tag Team Champions. I know you're ready to go off. I know you're ready to push the button, but let's hold off on that because, in Atlanta, Georgia, in the public broadcasting studios, there were very few people upset about that victory. But I know you have more than 2 cents to share. So we'll get to that momentarily. But let's get to NWA Power. Now, this was the season finale. A lot of people aren't sure what that means. That means there will be no more shows until next season, which, oddly enough, will kick off on December 17th. Which is just 3 days after the pay-per-view, literally 2 days after the first TV taping. So the production side of the National Wrestling Alliance really is going to have a huge turnaround in such a short time. They're going to produce a full-hour television in 2 days.
Wow.
That sounds pretty crazy, right?
It does, but you got to think there are, half a dozen wrestling promotions out there right now producing content like that. So it's not totally unheard of. And I think the fans really enjoy sometimes the rawness that comes from that type of stuff. We had a whole show on Jim Cornette and all the issues that went on with that. Of course, that was its own animal. And I think this will also help the NWA in a way that if things don't go great, we can say, hey, this is part of the growing pains, and they may not catch so much flack. I give them a little bit of leeway. All in all, I just think that when you have what they're really trying to do is present a product that the fans can love, a throwback wrestling product that maybe lifelong wrestling fans can identify with, but at the same time, they can give some more content, some more nostalgia, some history to the new fans or the younger fans to kind of, have something to connect it with. And so I commend the NWA. I always commend anybody that takes all the time and the effort and the money that it takes to put something together like they're doing. Even when they make mistakes and they don't do things wrong, to me, it's a little spoiled, kind of like a spoiled mentality to expect anybody in any level to be perfect. WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, AEW, any of these events that are working so hard and have wrestlers and producers and just people all over the place, just busting their butts to try to put on the best product that they can. I mean, I know Dave Marquez personally, and I know he's given everything he has to this, and he
Right.
always does. And so it's hard for me to kind of to be too negative towards the whole production itself if they're making honest mistakes that aren't really intentional. I mean, I think if the whole Jim Cornette thing was on purpose, I think maybe you have a little something to be mad at them about. But again, I don't think it was an intentional screw up to make everybody mad.
And you know, from more than one person, I've heard that there's this huge conspiracy because I don't know how closely you follow the NWA Twitter account,
Yeah.
but weeks ago they showed Wade Barrett, Stu Barrett at a Smashing Pumpkins concert, and he was there talking to Dave Lagana and of course Billy Corgan, and now everyone is saying, "Oh, so this was the plan all along to get rid of Jim Cornette. We let him say something stupid and let him take the heat for it, and either fire him or he'll quit, and then you could bring in Stu Barrett, and excuse me, and everything is fine." And no, guys, I don't think that's what happened. I don't think the NWA is that nefarious. I don't think that if they had a problem with Jim Cornette. Again, this was never a full-time gig for Corny. He could have walked anytime he wanted to. And to be honest, if you ever listen to his podcast, he hates traveling. He hates driving in Atlanta. I don't think he was long for the show anyways. I think at some point he was going to, maybe take a step back and do strictly just pay-per-views, or maybe nothing at all. Maybe he would walk away from the company. I mean, we can't really say because it was a cush gig for him. I mean, he was only working 2 days a week for like 8 weeks of television, 9 weeks of television. So, but needless to say, that controversy kind of led into last week's show.
Yeah.
Which, oh my gosh, Kevin, that was a train wreck, buddy.
Well, the funny thing for me was that, like, you asked me, like, did you watch the show last week? And it's crazy. I did, but I actually forgot because it really made that little of an impact on me. For me as a wrestler, like the fans I will honestly say that the fans were probably one of the biggest part of the show for me. And you got to see me come, live to Hollywood. Like, I mean, I would turn my back on camera and get in trouble all the time just because I wanted to interact with the people.
Right.
So to not have people in the audience for a match for me personally, even as a former wrestler or even as a fan, it just didn't do a whole lot for me. And then the whole recap shows, I'm not sure whose idea it was. I'm not trying to knock anybody. Like I said, I just took however long trying to defend everybody involved. So, I'm really on their side, but I just didn't think it was much of it didn't do a whole lot for me. Let's just leave it at that and just say it wasn't a very memorable show. And I don't think we're even going to take a whole lot of time. I'm not going to take any more time talking about it because, as you were saying off air, this show this week was actually one of the better shows they put on.
Well, let me just pontificate for a moment because I've got some
Please pontificate.
I've got some pent up promo aggression that I need to let out.
Please.
First and foremost, I don't know what the plan was. Okay, I don't know what I don't have a script. I don't have the 20-year plan that's been the phrase that was made famous by Lagana and Billy Corgan. I don't know what the plan was, but I know that when I was in Atlanta, they taped 2 days for 4 hours, which equals 8 hours of recorded television. Now, if you stretch that out, yeah, you could probably get 9 hours of TV by breaking up and doing a lot of backstage promos, doing some skit, or maybe even, there was a world title defense in Milwaukee. Maybe they could have used some of that, the matches from that show, and brought that to NWA Power to kind of stretch it out. And I think if they would have done that, that would have been a better use of than what we got. I really feel like that show, it just was a disappointment. And Eli Drake took to Twitter because a lot of people were accusing the NWA of trying to edit out Jim Cornette, which we saw that wasn't the case. It was just that was always going to be the light show, and it kind of makes sense. It was Thanksgiving weekend or Thanksgiving week. You yourself was traveling. A lot of people were traveling to be with loved ones during the holidays. So I think they always knew that was going to be a light week for them. But I mean, if that was the case, why not just put Nick Aldis in a chair by a fireplace and have him talk about his favorite title defenses in the last 2 years?
Or why not give Ricky Starks a good 15-minute match where we can see his awesome skills in the ring? I mean, come on, give the people what they want.
Sure. Well, but then again, there's 10 weeks of television between the pay-per-view that's happening on December 14th, which is available at Fight TV. You guys can go ahead, make sure you order before the 7th, because after the 7th, the price goes up to $24.99. You can get it now for $19.99. That's a discount. And who doesn't want to save money this time of year? But that was a free promo, Lagana. You're welcome. But the other part of it is, they recorded 9 weeks of television for a 10-week period, and they recorded 8 hours of programming. Now, I want to say the first 6 episodes, first 7 episodes, they were packed with wrestling. They could have done things to stretch this thing out. And like you said, a 15-minute match with Ricky Starks. Hey, I'm all about that. Or, there was a match in Hollywood with Ricky Starks and Caleb Conley. Why not just bring that over and show that? Yeah, I would have loved to see that match. And I know that was on, and it was on Hollywood. It was on Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. You guys could go check out their channel on Fight TV and check that match out. But there are so many things they could have done. We got what we got. It is what it is. It's time to move on. And this week was a great rebound show. And it wasn't just a great rebound show. It was a great episode. This was absolutely what they needed after the last 2 weeks. And, I'm not going to say all is forgiven, and I'm not going to say every NWA fan who turned their nose up when Cornette left is coming back, but this was the kind of show that you could really build some momentum on. Unfortunately, it was the season finale, but we're only a few weeks away from more NWA Power, and I'm looking forward to it. Now, the show kicked off again with Joe Galley in his little makeshift studio, telling us that this was the season finale, and excuse me, I lost my train of thought there. That this is it before the pay-per-view. They started kind of running down the pay-per-view before the show even started. I forgot to mention the pre-show that they leads up to the start of the show, or they have that countdown. They did a great job of retelling the story of what's going on with Nick Aldis and Camille. Agreed. And James Storm, and it was kind of a good recap without wasting a whole lot of actual TV time.
Well, if you'd never watched the show, sorry to just butt in there, but if you've never watched the show and you watch that intro, I really think you're almost kind of caught up a little bit, and it almost makes you want to go back and see what happened leading up to it to get a little more context for the show. But I just wanted to throw that in because I thought that was a great job that they did.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, this week I decided to take really good notes. In fact, I watched the show twice just to make sure that I had everything set up. So when you look at the already 85,000 plus views, 2 of those were J Cal. I take that. So the first match, we already have 61,000 people watching live. Wow. And excuse me, I said 61,000. That's not correct. Excuse me. 6,100. Sorry. 61,000 is a lot more impressive. 6,100 is kind of in line with what they've been getting. In fact, it was up from the previous show, which, again, if anyone was watching that show, they knew right away what that show was. So already we had a greater audience streaming live at 6:05 Eastern. The first match was slated to be Ricky Starks taking on Colt Boom Boom Cabana in what would be an exhibition match. You got some 2 cents. Let's hear it, baby. Let's go, Kevin.
Well, honestly, as of course, a diehard, lifelong Ricky Starks fan, and a somewhat fan of Colt Cabana as well. Not let me rephrase that. I really like Colt Cabana, just not as much as I like Ricky Starks.
That's fair.
Mainly, yeah. I wish a lot of times I have critiques of people, and I know sometimes people critique Colt Cabana, but I say as a actual wrestler who wrestled, what he does is not easy. It's just not. And there are many times I've watched his matches where things will happen, and I'll just go, dang, how did he do that? And it's not the moves and all that. It's the timing. It's the some of the things that he does so second hand It's just not something that just the everyday wrestler can do. Even
Now,
guys
Kevin,
that you may know as household names can't do some of the stuff that he
let,
does.
let me butt in real quick because
Sure.
you were in the ring, so let me ask you a question. Colt Cabana isn't a cruiserweight by any stretch, and I'm not calling him a fat ass, but he's not Ricky Starks.
Sure.
But the way he moves around the ring, I mean,
Very athletic.
He seems very light on his feet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that Superman dive pin that he did a couple weeks ago. I mean, that's an awesome way to pin somebody. But like a guy that big, how does he move around the ring like that?
Well, it's funny. So I bring this up. I say this all the time because, my buddy Bull, we traveled together for years, right, and we trained together and all that. And I mean, you can look at me and look at Bull and make a lot of assumptions about our athletic ability. Right. But one thing you wouldn't know looking at Bull, who's, round, big, 300-pound guy, we wouldn't classify him as a hard body by any stretch. But I mean, Bull can hit a baseball a mile. Wow. The guy is a great athlete. He can move like you wouldn't believe in. And I just say, look at offensive linemen in the NFL. There are so many professional athletes in sports that you just go, okay, just because someone doesn't have a six-pack and abs does not mean that they're not a great athlete. And that's kind of what I would say about Colt Cabana. You can just see by the way he moves around that he's athletic. He may not have the body of a guy like Ricky Starks, but at the same time, I look at Colt Cabana and go, hey, he looks like a wrestler. And that's more important. That's more important than, having veins in your abs, though I always felt like that was important for me. But at the same time, as a fan, I can separate the two. As a fan, somebody that just likes to watch wrestling, I always love the big guys, especially big guys that can move around as long as what they do is believable. And not over the top, and it needs to make some sense, at least to me. I don't mind them doing cruiserweight type moves and those types of things as long as it makes sense. Right. If it doesn't make sense and you're doing stuff just to do it, that takes the believability away. Because if you're having a real competition between two wrestlers, you're not going to waste a bunch of movement. And actually, that's a good segue into this match, because of some of the stuff that I was happy about and some of the stuff that I wasn't happy about. Okay.
Well, hey, let's not take any more time. Let's go right into the match. Obviously, we're expecting Cabana Starks. Next thing you know, we get Aaron Stevens out there with the question mark karate. And, Stevens is not happy. He's wanting to know why he doesn't get the matches. He wants to know why he isn't getting a title shot. Now, I do have here written down that Aaron Stevens is actually 1-2 in singles competition in NWA Power. Ricky Starks is 3-1-1. Mm-hmm. And in fact, all of Aaron Stevens' losses are at the hands of Ricky Starks. So
yes,
the argument, if we're looking at this, a legitimate professional wrestling organization, I mean, Aaron Stevens doesn't have anything to stand on. He's a loser. He hasn't won any matches, and Starks has probably got one of the best win-loss records in the company right now. So obviously that's a little fishy, but this is entertainment. Sure. This is wrestling, but this is also sports entertainment. So Cabana tells Stevens, "Hey man, you're not even a pro wrestler. You're an actor, and get out of here." And Stevens isn't having it. He just says, "Hey, he wants that shot." Cabana says, "Look, if you can beat Ricky Starks right now, because we were going to do an exhibition, if you can beat Starks right now, you're going to earn a title shot." So without hesitation, Stevens accepts. He sends the question mark to the back, says he'll pay him for the night, go take the rest of the night off, and we've got a match, a return match. They faced each other now. This is for the third time in singles competition. They've also faced each other in tag team matches. One of the things that I really liked seeing in this match was Starks. He hit this really awesome spear. I don't know if you saw that.
Yep.
And that like I popped out of my chair when I saw that. I popped live when I saw it. I popped again when I saw it again on TV or on YouTube. I thought that was great. This is the first time that Stevens has used his scarf as a weapon in the match. I mean, it wasn't so heinous, but he kind of used it to lead Ricky Starks around the ring for a little bit. And then out of nowhere, Aaron Stevens has the knee injury. Cornette says maybe it's a torn ACL, and he goes down. And it's always like, I know in the arena, look, it's a wrestling show. You know this.
Mm-hmm.
Real life happens in wrestling. Guys get hurt in the middle of a match. What's your take on that trope of a wrestler faking the injury and, working the crowd? How do you feel about that?
Well, if you want my honest opinion, and this probably goes more to booking and production than actually the in-ring work. Guys like Aaron Stevens, wrestlers of that nature, which I would classify them maybe as entertainers.
Sure.
Guys that are a lot more talk than substance. I mean, that's just the real way the way it is. You can't blame them for doing what they've got to do to win. That part, right. I actually like that. I think that is believable. It's realistic. If he's outclassed, outmatched, Ricky is by far, a legit, technically sound, up and coming, I can beat you many ways type of wrestler. I don't knock him for that. But what I do knock is the fact that, look, versus Ricky Starks in an exhibition match, it is a lot more entertainment value in terms of what I can watch on the show, right. And for ratings, for viewership, and all of that. There's 100 different ways, and as we've seen on these shows, they do all kinds of different stories and angles and those types of things. There's 100 different ways to get Aaron Stevens to where they wanted him to be, right. At the end of the match. If it's Cabana and Stevens they want, if that's the match that they're pushing for, you can do that without having to put a second-rate match out there. And again, I'm not calling Aaron Stevens second-rate. I'm not saying the match was bad. I'm saying for our entertainment buck, Colt Cabana versus Ricky Starks for at least 5 to 8 minutes would have been great. Right. I would have loved to seen it. And then whatever you're trying to do with Aaron Stevens, you can still do that. You can still have your schmoz thing that happens, with the karate guy, and you can have all that. I mean, I think in the end could have happened so many different ways. And I just thought, you're putting Aaron Stevens in a position where he's not doing what he does best, which, is wrestling. Right. And I'm not knocking him. It's not a knock. I'm saying for the entertainment value for the fans, we still could have gotten Aaron Stevens versus Colt Cabana, which is what we end up with this match, correct?
Well,
I mean, that's the ultimate.
Well, so the match gets, Stevens gets the victory. And just as a side note, I want to point out, before he was Mizdow and Damian Sandow or Aaron Rex in Impact, he actually competed in Atlanta at the NWA 60th anniversary. He challenged Mike DiBiase for the NWA North American Championship. Someone pointed that out to me today, and I didn't realize it was the same guy. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about that because the lineage, the history and tradition, the legacy. Here's the guy who, when he came to the NWA, everyone's like, oh, that's the guy that wrestled in the WWE. He teamed up with the Miz, or that's a guy from Impact. No, he had a history already in the NWA, and he was at the 60th anniversary show. So I just want to bring that up. And
on a side note, I've wrestled Mike DiBiase.
So there it is. See, we're all buddies now. So
yeah, he gave me an Irish whip so hard. Mike DiBiase Irish whipped me to the corner so hard that I literally lost my footing and flew into the middle turnbuckle, and it almost knocked me out.
Wow.
I know, it's crazy. And then I got a little heated, and it was back when I wore wrestling armor, because this was a death match league or whatever, and I'm in my armor and all this stuff. And I grabbed him and I returned the favor and gave him a shoulder tackle with some of my, my shoulder things that I would wear when I wear my little Batman costume looking thing. And his bicep got torn from that
shit.
stuff. It was an unfortunate injury. It wasn't on purpose, but we had a pretty stiff match.
Well, look at that. And was he still the North American champion at the time, or was that?
This was probably 2009.
Okay, so it was.
So 2008, 2009 era. So
yeah, that's
not quite sure if he was. It probably
was. No. I think this was probably maybe a year or two after he had already moved on from the NWA North American title. But getting back to the show, they actually set up it's going to be a triple threat match for the pay-per-view. It's going to be Ricky Starks, and Aaron Stevens, and Colt Cabana, because what they said during the show is that he would have an opportunity to wrestle for the national title. They didn't say he was going to be the opponent. So we are going to get some Ricky Starks and Colt Cabana at the pay-per-view. You're just going to have Aaron Stevens involved. And now we know that the pay-per-view also is going to feature Trevor Murdoch taking on the Question Mark. So it's questionable, see what I did there, if he will be ringside or have anything to do with the national title match.
Well, that's exciting. And actually, you know, Colt Cabana, he's what I would consider a cerebral wrestler.
Sure.
And so putting him in a match like a three-way, for me, three-way matches can be sometimes like pulling teeth, just because of the kind of wrestling I prefer to watch. You know, I prefer typical straight-up matches.
Right.
But having a guy like Colt in there who's a great mind, that sounds like that could actually be the show stealer.
It might be. You know, there's a reason why the NWA is so high on Ricky Starks.
Of course.
Colt Cabana is a former 2-time world champion, and as we've just said, we've lamented over and over, he's a great wrestler. And Aaron Stevens, although he has a lot of shtick and a lot of gimmick, he's also he's an accomplished wrestler. I mean, don't let the gimmick fool you guys. He's actually really good at what he does. He's a great heel, and all these matches and silliness and awkwardness that's been going on is kind of building that up to make him a hated wrestler. So it's working. It's working.
Well, then let's hope we see in the pay-per-view. I'm really hoping to see some, you know, these kind of events are for solidifying or finishing or giving the audience kind of what they've been built up to see. Right. So let's hope we get some finality, at least to an extent. Of course, you always want to leave the people wanting more. But at some point, we want to have some level of finality in some of these feuds and some of these angles that's going on. And I would love to see a little bit of that so that they can start some fresh angles as well.
Yeah.
Though some of them I'm sure are going to carry on past the pay-per-view.
For sure.
But I'd also like to see some finality in some of these matches so that we can kind of move on to the next phase of programming.
I couldn't agree more. Like we said, Starks and Stevens have been in the ring about 4 times now. And we're ready for some punctuality. We're ready for that to be over and move on for what's next. And what was next on the show was yeah, that was good, huh?
Segway City, baby, that was awesome.
I've been doing this for 10 years. The James Storm promo, which did a lot, I think, so much to help sell this pay-per-view. Cannot stress it enough. And one of my biggest qualms, one of my biggest complaints with what happened last week is that they didn't show the match that made a number 1 contender for the national or for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Now, in and of itself, having a 3-way match between Eli Drake, who's wrestled 1 singles match, and Ken Anderson, who's wrestled 0 singles matches, and James Storm, who's has a losing record in the end of, you know, I mean, it's true. If we're only basing the show on what's happened on NWA Power and the NWA pay-per-views, James Storm has a losing record. He hasn't won a match on NWA TV. Oh, excuse me. He defeated Josephus. That's it. That's all he's got. So his credibility to just announce that he's going to be the challenger for the world title at the pay-per-view, I really felt sucked a lot of the energy out of the match. And at that point, I didn't even care anymore. It's like, who cares? He's a loser. He's a bum. You haven't told the story online on TV of who James Storm is and why he deserves that shot. And that's exactly what James Storm says in this promo. He admits there's a conspiracy theory or a conspiracy against him, that they scrubbed his match from the archives. They scrubbed him off of NWA Power, so you didn't get to see him win that match. And then they don't talk about how he almost nearly won the match, won the world title back in January at the New Year's Clash. So I mean, he had a perfect explanation. I mean,
and how about Nick Aldis? Why not? Let's just sit right here for a second, because they go together.
Absolutely.
But I thought Nick Aldis, his response I thought this was, and I'm gonna go. I may be going on a limb here. I'll do that every now and then. But I would say so many times people have promos just to have.
Right.
Them. I felt like this promo, this couple of series of promos, and even the one about Camille, I feel like they're telling stories with the promos.
Absolutely.
And they're telling stories with some of the things that they are and aren't doing on television. And again, I would say there are times when the NWA looks, looks its age in terms of being a new, kind of a new production. Sure. But then there's stuff like this that I think shows that they do have some potential to tell stories in a way that you're not seeing on other wrestling promotions out there. I don't think I've seen anyone. I watch WWE, I watch NXT. I'll peek in on TNA sometimes, and my friend Jamie forces me to watch MLW sometimes. And I really haven't seen anyone use promos the way they use promos in this. Right. To tell a story, engage interest in a match. I thought Nick Aldis' response, the suspended disbelief is there. Oh, yeah. I'm sitting here going, man, this feels like is this, are they just putting TV out there based on what's really going on behind the scenes? It felt, or are they doing this thing? Are they just telling us a really good story?
It felt personal, right? Like I felt a little uncomfortable when and we'll jump ahead here since we're talking about it. When we get to Nick Aldis, Aldis, he says, I have it written down here. Aldis tosses out the conspiracy theories. First and foremost, he says the three-way was tossed out because you interjected yourself into a match that you didn't belong in. And what was the NWA going to do when we have cameras rolling and you're doing this in front of an audience instead of doing it backstage like you're supposed to? And a squeaky wheel got the grease. So you got your
derb.
and then the match fell apart. Like, again, the audience at home didn't get to see it. And this was one of those, and forgive the language, a clusterfuck. At the end of the match, everything fell apart. The whole arena, like, you remember how a couple weeks ago we talked about the show where everyone emptied the out into the floor and it looked like a wrestling convention? This was the exact opposite. This was a huge schmoz. Everyone was fighting. But at the end of it, James Storm cuts a promo. And this is another reason why I think maybe that match got wiped off, because he became a face in that match. I want him a face, obviously.
Well, let me throw something else out there at you.
Sure.
Because, and I'm gonna tease something we talked about earlier with Cornette, but the way that they've told a story in this, it's either them making the most out of a bunch of clusterish type events, or somebody's telling some really good stories and they're smarter than we think they are.
Maybe
because in reality, this is old school wrestling. Yeah. And in old school wrestling, you never gave the fans the match they wanted to see until they had to pay for it.
Right. Absolutely.
Period. With WWE, you pay monthly. Like it's not the same. It's not the same.
Right.
To me, if it's me and I'm picking up on this, I may be wrong. And Marquez, if he ever hears me, you can tell me if I'm wrong. By the way, I love Dave Marquez. Love you, Dave. Hopefully, if you ever listen, I still love you dearly. He's just a great guy. He knows his stuff. Yeah. Man. He's a wonderful producer, and and I love direct communication. That's my love language, and that was something he was always great with. But I will say this, that it makes you want to buy the pay-per-view because you haven't really gotten any wrestling classics on these shows.
No.
All they're doing is kind of baiting you along to want to see some of these matches. And I think not giving you James Storm, in his element, not giving you Anderson in a match at all on the free TV,
right,
and then only giving you one match of Eli Drake for free. I think, again, you're looking at possibly something that is very intentional, that is meant to garner interest, because there's nothing worse than when you hear about something this was old school too, to me, but there's nothing worse than hearing about an event where titles changed hands or something great happened and you didn't get to see it, or you weren't there.
Right.
So this makes people want to buy tickets to the show, makes them want to come to the live events where they're going to get, kind of get what you've been hoping for, but you're not going to get it without paying for it. And I take my hats off to them for doing it, because I know there's a little bit of this is intentional. And if they're this smart to do it this way with this thing, I'm not going to take it out of their hands. That maybe they maybe I had a client who knows nothing of wrestling. She watched it when she was growing up, but she a little bit here and there. But the first thing when I was talking to her, of course, I talked to my clients about NWA.
Sure.
The first thing,
word of mouth
of course
advertising.
Yeah. So I'm talking to her. She goes, "Well, that just sounds like they did that on purpose for publicity." And I'm sitting here going, it doesn't hurt Cornette. I mean, and if he was short term anyways, and they were going to bring this guy Barrett in anyways, I'm not going to say they did it on purpose because I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is a part of wrestling that I tell everybody when they ask me questions. Of course, being in public all the time, having my picture of wrestling up at work, and people hearing about what I used to be a professional wrestler.
Yeah.
Of course, they always ask me the same question. Is it choreographed? Is it rigged? Sure. Is it this? Is it that? And I said, I said, I can give you the language that I use, but you're not going to understand it. You're not going to know what working means or angles or a swerve or anything. But I can tell you this, that, and when people say kayfabe is dead too, that's another one I laugh at. I can tell you this. When The Rock fought John Cena at WrestleMania, and him and Vince and John, when The Rock and John Cena and Vince had a conversation, if that's what happened, because I wasn't there, because I don't know, because I'm not Vince.
Right.
I'm not making $75 million a year like John Cena, or $100 million a year like The Rock. Right. I don't know what conversation goes on in that locker room or in that business room.
Right.
And I think so many times when we don't know what, like I said, I know Dave Marquez very well, but I don't know what went on between Adam Pearce and Colt Cabana, Dave Marquez. I don't know.
Sure.
Like if you were to say, Kevin, how was NWA Hollywood run? I can say, I know how it was run for me,
right,
but I can't tell you how it was run for everybody else. And so again, I think this is one of those situations where believability, suspended disbelief, those kinds of things are huge for me. Because when you go to a movie, the last thing when you go into a movie, you go to watch Tom Cruise, you're like, that Tom Cruise isn't that guy.
Right.
But if it's just so far-fetched and such a farce, and it's, you just go, okay, this isn't even fun.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm watching wrestling.
Sure.
And so I really feel like the way they've spun this angle with Nick Aldis, James Storm, Camille's boyfriend, the stuff they post on social media,
right,
all this stuff, to me, there's so much close to home with it and so much reality to it. I give them a lot of credit because a lot of the other wrestling leagues out there won't touch stuff like this. And I think the NWA is taking some risks with it, but I think it's great because they're telling stories with it. They're using social media so well with this.
And let me touch on two things too. Number one, when you said, they're going to make you pay for it. That's the thing that they've always said, like, look, we're going to make our product available to you. We're going to take down all the pay windows. That's why they're on YouTube. They're not a subscription based. They're not asking for one penny from you until it comes time for the pay-per-views. And then they want you to shell out. Mm-hmm. And of course, I mean, why wouldn't you? If they did their job, you should be wanting to pay for this pay-per-view. The second thing is, when I was at the NWA press conference ahead of these TV tapings, one thing that Billy Corgan said is that he wanted to bring the NWA into the 21st century, and they wanted to lend their show to like the meme culture. When you say that they're hitting it on all cylinders on social media, I have to agree, and I think that wasn't an accident. That's certainly what they're going for. And if you're on Instagram, you'll see content there. If you're on Twitter, you'll see content there, and if you're on Facebook, you'll see content there. They're really maximizing their efforts. Now, I mean, they were even showing the NWA Power show on Facebook for a while, but I think that became more of a burden, so they stopped doing it. But so what you're saying, absolutely.
I really, again, they've done some things wrong, but again, like, God forbid, like, how many, I love WWE. I mean, I get a lot of flack for it because I'm an ex-wrestler and I'm supposed to be smart and all that stuff, but production value,
sure.
Until you've been on the ground with that company and rolled up to an arena where there's nothing, there's seats and a floor, and their production team, the work that the wrestlers put in. I mean, everybody from top to bottom works so hard,
right,
and they make so much sacrifice. To me, it's like I'm going to appreciate everything. And when it comes down to a few mistakes here and there, or if they don't push the wrestler I like I'll be open. I'm not a big fan of, say, the Bray Wyatt thing.
Sure.
But I'm not going to like sell WWE up the river because 1% of their show or whatever percent of their show isn't my flavor of ice cream. I'm not going to poo-poo everybody in the whole thing. And and I guess we call this still the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
And I'm going to go the same direction with NWA. Everything they're doing is not great, and I'm not going to agree with everything, as we're going to get to probably here in a minute.
Right.
That I don't agree with everything that they're doing, and I can give good criticism when it's due, but at the same time, you got to give credit when it's due too.
Absolutely.
The production value is really good on this show, and that's something that is a big deal to me, because that means that the behind the scenes, there's a lot of effort being made and a lot of money being spent to put a product out there that looks good, sounds good. And I think as time goes on, if they can keep doing this, they'll work out a lot of the kinks here and there, and hopefully work on some of these booking issues that I'm going to address, that I have addressed and will continue to address.
So just to wrap up the whole James Storm promo, again, like this was his conspiracy, and as part of the stipulation, and that's one of the things that kind of bothers me, is that it seems like all these title matches tend to get convoluted, the stipulations and everything else. Mm-hmm. But to what Aldis explained, the 2 out of 3 falls, him and Cody kind of put on a clinic at the 70th anniversary show, and he wants to show Storm what it's like to be the world's champion. So they're going to go with that old school tradition of the 2 out of 3 falls for the world title. But with the stipulation also added is each one of them gets to choose their own referee. James Storm goes to Baby Hebner and asks him to be his choice for referee. Now, being a lifelong wrestling fan, nothing could go wrong when you ask a Hebner to referee your match. I mean, there's never been any kind of controversy associated with the Hebners whatsoever. So when James Storm's asked if he could trust them, well, by God, the senior official for the NWA, you can trust a Hebner. I just thought that was silly. Next, we get the George South High Spots promo. George South was wrestling against the great Muta at WrestleCade, so he's alive and well and appearing at a wrestling convention coming towards you. Up next, we get they tease the Muta spot. They're teasing the tag team match. We get a very interesting look at the question mark. This was again something that was filmed at WrestleCade weekend. It seems like I don't know. Again, was this planned or did they just luck into this? But they were able to get a lot of content from WrestleCade to use on NWA Power, which was great because they kind of needed it. And again, this show was so much better than last week's show. They got a lot more into it. The question mark is cutting promos. They're talking about how he's your friend because if you're the question mark, you like everybody because everybody likes you, and which means you like yourself. And I don't know. I'm not a spiritual advisor. I don't get some of this stuff. I'm not Mongolian, but the question mark is undefeated in the NWA. Let me say that again. The question mark is undefeated in the NWA. He's got a 2-0 record with one draw, one no contest.
Who was that no contest with?
That no contest, I believe, was with your boy Ricky Starks.
Yeah, he can't beat the man Ricky. That's all there is to it. Moving right along.
So, and again, I keep track of this. I've been keeping track of this for weeks. The NWA live views at this point, there was 7,200 people watching again, which was up from last week. So that's always positive, and I want to reinforce the positivity because again, we're gonna put it down when it's down. But when you have the live viewers who are coming back to the show after the Cornette incident, after the dismal show last week, something was positive there, and obviously they. A lot of the great Muta stuff certainly got people interested, and that's what we get next is the Muta Aldis altercation. Now, this seemingly was much ado about nothing. It was a photo opportunity. It was to me it felt a little bit like clickbait until, and I'm going to put this on the screen in post, but the great Muta responded, and he said that the match is going to happen in 2020. Now, things can always change in pro wrestling. Kevin, you know this. You've been there.
Sure.
Promises are made that don't always fall through. But
sure,
as a lifelong NWA fan, as someone who remembers Muta wearing not the 10 pounds of gold, but the big gold belt, the one that Flair wore and the one that Sting wore and the one that Muta wore. I'm excited about that opportunity. Now I know Muta's not a young guy, and a lot of the complaints that you're going to have about later in the show, I'm sure you could apply to Muta as well. However, Muta is this guy that kind of transcends time and space. And I know it sounds goofy, but when Nick Aldis defeated Sting in Impact, Sting was already past his prime, but it was still meaningful. It was a way of kind of passing the torch. And I think anytime you can introduce history to the NWA with a name as synonymous with pro wrestling, puroresu, if you want to call it, when you bring in a guy like, the great Muta, I say go for it. And I don't care if it happens in Japan. I don't care if it happens in the United States. If they put it on a pay-per-view, they'll get my $20. They'll get my $25. I don't care. I'm excited about it. I hope it happens, but who knows?
Well, and let's bookmark that, because, as I'm going to say here in a moment, I have no problem, with novelties and, people, older wrestlers making an appearance. As my analogy will be made, throwing out the first pitch. In fact, let's just go ahead and move on to I think the next thing will be the tag match, right?
Well,
and I'll come back around to my comments on the great Muta and Nick Aldis.
We got to get through just a few more things before we get to that tag match, because we had the Melina promo. Now we'll get through this quickly because I know you're chomping.
Oh yeah.
The Melina.
Yeah, and it wasn't the best segment of the show.
No, and honestly, believe it or not, this was much better than it was live. It was very, very hard to follow live. I remember thinking, like, what the hell is she talking about?
Yeah, I can't understand her promos. Her interview last week, I didn't understand what she was talking about. And this one, I'm going, are you drunk? Like, what's going on?
And I don't know if this is just, pre-show jitters. This was her first time. This was the second night of TV taping. It was still the first night she had been there. So I don't know if she's just getting back into it and it's taking a little bit longer to warm up. They did a lot to save it in post-production, and it still wasn't great. They did bring out Allison Kay, who, Jaden and DK, we all agreed that she's great. She does a lot of talking. She's like the Stone Cold of the women's division, because she just says what she feels and goes out there and tries to whip people's butts. She got bushwhacked by Marty and Thunder Rosa. That was the end of that. Then we get the silly Tony Falk commercials, the waffles and tire irons. Being a fan of the Waffle House myself, that's great. It's fun. But, obviously this is just silliness to be silly, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you guys love it, go buy the t-shirt. I'm sure the NWA would appreciate it. Did you ever work for Tony Falk?
Gosh, where did he run out of? I don't. The name doesn't ring a bell, but it's possible.
I want to say he was like the Saw Arena, wasn't he? Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh! If that was in what was it, Georgia or Tennessee? Yeah. If that was him, then yes, he wrote me a check, but I don't know him extremely well.
Did it cash?
Oh yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't have any murder or anybody killed on my record, so I got paid every time.
There you go. The next thing is we get to that Aldis promo. One thing I just wanted to point out is that he said the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and then he furthered saying that he was going to drown James Storm in grease. And the visual of that, right? That's such like a mob hit. And I'm like, he's going to give you like the fat kid in Matilda who's eating the chocolate cake. You want the cake? Then eat all the cake. That's how Nick Aldis is going to treat James Storm.
Well, and when British people say stuff, like we don't quite always get what they're saying, so we just kind of go, again.
Yeah.
We don't know if we're like I don't know if I'm missing some like cultural like something I'm supposed to pick up on that I don't know. So it was honestly, it's not to me with the Aldis and promo and the the Cowboys James Storm promo. It wasn't as much the quality of the way they spoke. I mean, of course, there could be a little bit to be desired in that.
Sure.
But I do like the way they told the story, and I do think that is a good sign in terms of some of the bright spots in the production and the booking.
And the intensity was there, which I think is the most important.
Sure.
They kind of furthered that. Lagana is in obviously the hotel room. He asks Nick, "Hey, so what's the deal with Camille?" And that's like the question that's been asked week in and week out for 8 weeks of television. What is going on with this chick? Now, Camille's been mostly mute on TV. We haven't heard her speak, but she did whisper something to James Storm. I also want to point out that Tim Storm, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion and somebody you're very familiar with, will be
my man,
the second referee in this match. So you've got Baby Hebner and you've got Tim Storm and a 2 out of 3 falls match with some great intense promos. I really think that this show is exactly what the pay-per-view needed. But getting back to Aldis, he dismisses Camille. She won't be in his corner at the pay-per-view, which could lead to some jocularity, of course. He doesn't want an asterisk next to his name because of anything Camille does. He wants that match between him and James Storm to be mano-a-mano. But with the whispers and the hints and the dissension in the ranks, you would think I'm pretty sure Camille's going to end up in James Storm's corner. What do you think?
Well, first off, if we're going to talk about predictions on this match, first and foremost, I think Tim Storm is the wild card. In this match. I don't know what to expect from him right now.
Yeah.
I know Tim personally. I know he's a great person.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you get to that stage of your career, when you've been to the top of the mountain and you sit there and you're alone at night and the belt that you used to lay next to in bed, at least in my behalf, I used to.
Yeah.
It's not there anymore.
Right.
And you have to watch television. You're watching somebody else carry around what you feel like is rightfully yours. And again, having him, he lost the match to Aldis, and I think that means he's not supposed to be able to compete for the title anymore.
Right.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, Nick Aldis, I don't know what he's thinking right now. And again, to me, Tim Storm would be the last person I would choose because he's a guy on edge right now.
Sure.
He's not telling me this. He's not writing me emails or sending me messages. We hadn't talked in a couple of years.
Sure.
But I'm telling you right now, he's willing to do whatever it takes to get his hands on that gold again, at least one last time.
Well, and
we saw this with Adam Pearce,
right?
That a guy that hey, Adam would do whatever it took, and again, I think you get to a point in your career where you say, look, I love you, Nick Aldis, we're buddies and friends, but our friendship's not going to be my legacy. Holding that gold one more time is going to be my legacy.
And remember that match, the first match that they had in NWA Power is the first main event, and we saw a different Tim Storm. I mean, for you guys who watched Tim Storm when he was working in other places, it wasn't too unfamiliar because the NWA has portrayed Tim Storm as a very squeaky clean, wholesome guy, but that man has some demons in his closet. I mean, we can't deny what he did in the past. And he wasn't always the good boy. And and so it's going to be interesting. You're right. What's going to happen? You're a former champion yourself, and you could speak to this more than anybody else. When that title left your waist for the first time, and you were there without the belt, what was the first thing on your mind? How to get it back, right?
Absolutely. And in your mind, like, again, for me, I know this is the way I am, and I was for sure when I was wrestling, was that I still believed I was the best.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll still probably tell you today, I think I'm still the best. But that's at the time, like I wasn't that far removed. And, I never really got one rematch, which was a little controversial in its own right. and I never got a chance again. And so I think Tim might be feeling a little bit of that heat, thinking, look, I've got a chance to make a stand. And if Nick Aldis is going to throw matches around to the squeaky wheel, I'm going to get squeaky myself.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, really. So anyways, I think it's going to be a great match. There's a lot of going up in the air. As far as Camille goes, I think she's a great, I think the way that they've written her or used her in this has been very good. I think she's a very limited talent, and she can be mad about it if she likes it and give me the middle finger like she gave Aldis on Twitter. But but again, I think this is another great, I guess I would say give credit to the production team for making her interesting without her having to do a whole lot. Because again, I see her as fairly limited, but very interesting.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's a lot of interest there. And so again, this is a very artistic, this is the kind of stuff that you're watching and you probably have no idea how much thought and creativity has to go into something like that. And I wouldn't be shocked. Camille is one of those talents that I could see some of the other companies that may have a little more financial backing. They may have an eye out for her.
Sure.
It wouldn't shock me to see her get a developmental deal somewhere down the road, just because of the look, the size, her size, the look, she was an athlete.
Oh yeah.
Having an athletic background, some of the connections in wrestling, I think there might be some more opportunity for her in terms of, beyond the NWA. Granted, the NWA doesn't blow up and can afford to play the money game.
Right.
With somebody like with another company that may have a little more financial backing. But again, I'm going to say I don't think right now, I think she's a very raw talent right now. And I think but I think everybody can see the potential.
Sure.
And I think they're doing a great job of creating a lot of interest around it. And again, right now, you and me both are sitting there going, there's 100 things that could happen in this main event. The one thing I'm going to say that I hope they don't do, or I hope that doesn't happen, let me rephrase it.
Sure.
Is that we get a good wrestling match.
Yeah.
That we don't have the quote unquote dusty finish kind of thing.
No.
Never a big fan of that sort of thing. It's just not once in a lifetime is fine, but once every other show, or once a year, let's have matches and let's have wrestling. And so hopefully that all the fun controversies surrounding this doesn't hurt the match, and we have another Cody Rhodes, Nick Aldis level wrestling classic to give a true main event at a National Wrestling Alliance show. That if you're going to have the name, you got to live up to those main events that have always been churned out, that the National Wrestling Alliance is known for, is delivering in those big main events.
I mean, you think of the big money feuds over the last couple of decades. Pearson Cabana, Pearson Blue Demon,
Pearson whoever.
Yeah, right. You could talk about those matches, those classics with Nick Madrid and Kevin Douglas.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I like both those guys, so I wanted to plug it.
I'll take it.
But you look at some of those feuds that have happened over the years. Hell, Tim Storm and Jax Dane, the build that showdown was huge. Rob Conway and Kojima in Japan. I mean, these things were these things were built up so powerful, and where there was an opportunity for this match to not get that same level of excitement, it's good to see that on the last episode of the season finale, they've got the interest level there. It's peaked. I think this is good. I kind of wish they had one more show leading up to the pay-per-view, but they said that there's going to be a 10 pounds of gold. So we'll see. We'll see how it all pans out. Now we're going to get to what you want.
The main event.
And I do want to point out two things. I'm going to give you as much time as you want, but let me mention these two things real quick. Number one, the main event for this show was at 7,400 people watching live. That was up again from the last episode. Not the highest it's ever been. They typically were around 8,000 live viewers for the main event. So it was down a little bit. I don't know if it's because it's the Rock and Roll Express. I don't know why, but it was up from the previous show. I do want to also point this out. In 1985, the Rock and Roll Express defeated Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev to win the NWA tag team titles for the very first time. 1985. Kevin Douglas, how old were you in 1985?
I was 5 years old doing push-ups, watching Kerry Von Erich.
You're doing the claw already? Were you working on that?
Yep. Oh yeah, I was putting my cousins in the claw.
I'm a little bit older. I was 7 years old. I was watching, probably the Rock and Roll Express wrestle for those tag titles. And then in '86, they defeat the Russians again, and then in '87, the Midnight Express, and then somehow, some way, in 1995. Man, I was a sophomore in high school. They win the tag team titles from Dick Murdoch and Randy Rose in your former neck of the woods in Dallas, Texas. Then in 1998, they somehow magically get the tag team championships, and they're in the WWF, the Invasion with Jim Cornette. And they ended up losing the titles to, I believe it was Thrasher and oh gosh, Mosh. Thank you, the Headbangers. Then we go fast forward 2 more years, South Korea. I don't know if you ever worked for these guys, the NWA Mid-Atlantic promotion. I think it was Ricky Nelson and a couple other guys. They had this sweet deal where they were getting tours of military bases, and they were taking wrestling shows to these military bases. I thought that was phenomenal because it was a way to bring your brand out there. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like those matches were even taped or anything. So you had the Rock and Roll Express winning the tag team titles in South Korea, and there's no video evidence of it. And again, in 2000, the internet was still in its infancy. If a tree falls in the woods and it doesn't make a sound, no one's there to hear it. A lot of this stuff isn't very easy to find. But what I want to point out is that over 4 decades, from 1985 to 2019, the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson have won NWA tag team titles. And Kevin, I'm gonna give you your time, but I want to say this: if they lose the titles at the pay-per-view and win them back at the next TV taping in February, there's a chance that they could be the only tag team ever to win the NWA tag team titles in 5 different decades. Okay.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, Kevin. I know you've been chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
I know you've said it on this show. You and Robert Gibson, no qualms at all. You said he was a gentleman, a nice guy. Ricky Morton, a former NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion, your current NWA World Tag Team Champion. Let him have it, champ. What did you think of this match?
So anybody that knows me personally, especially in the wrestling world, knows that we talked about this on the show. And actually, I planted the seed on the show continuously. You probably didn't know it. I was doing it. But now when I bring it up, it's going to make a lot of sense. This is why I was a great wrestler. Believability.
Yes, sir.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal to me.
Yes.
Because every wrestler faces that question from the everyday fan. And, is it real or is it choreographed? I mean, these are questions I get every single day. And, it's things like this that make it very difficult to have an argument. And I'm just being blunt. It's not believable, and I go out and I use off air. I gave you this and I got your permission to kind of use it. But I'm a big Nolan Ryan fan,
right?
I'm from Texas. It was amazing when how old are the Rock and Roll Express? Are they like 60?
Yeah, they're both in their 60s. I think 63 and 61. Okay.
No knock against 60-year-old men, like still being in shape and still being able to wrestle a little bit. Like there's nothing against that. I'm not against it. I'm not against their celebrity. I'm not against the fact that they are legends and Hall of Famers. There's nothing like I said, there's nothing against that. Just like I have nothing against Nolan Ryan being a Hall of Famer, being the all-time strikeout leader, all that. When he was 40 years old, he was still pitching in the major leagues because he could still throw a 96-mile-an-hour fastball. It was believable.
Right.
Okay? But if Nolan Ryan today were to go sign with the Washington Nationals, I'm fine with him throwing out the first pitch in the game. But if he goes to sign a contract with the Washington Nationals and then Washington and the teams that play the Nationals just to appease his celebrity because he can still get a pop from the crowd to appease his celebrity and let him hum fastballs past him so he could get some strikeouts so that the fans could go, oh, look, he just set a record for being the first man to strike out 10 guys at 60 years old.
Yeah.
I know wrestling is not baseball.
Right.
I know that. You're not telling me something I don't know. But again, it's the same reason when you cast Sylvester Stallone as Rambo. He's an old man past his prime, being an old man Rambo, not doing young man Rambo things.
Right.
And again, I go back to saying, look, these guys are 60 years old, and this company is trying to be relevant today. There's nothing wrong with having them go out and have matches, and nothing wrong with them going out and having kind of novelty type, being novelty. Throw out the first pitch, go out there, get some sympathy from the crowd. That's fine. But I'm telling you, there was no suspended disbelief for me in this match at all. None.
Right.
Meaning I watch a Ricky Starks match and I go, okay, this guy is in his prime. He could beat anybody at any given time.
Right.
He's got that underdogness about him that's believable. But I knew watching the match, I knew that if the Rock and Roll Express are going to win this match, it's going to be with a cheesy roll-up. It's going to be a misdirection thing. I knew it. I watched the match. I didn't want to watch it because it's painful for me to watch as someone who's retired when I should have retired, so that other people could actually have a chance to move into my spot and actually be believable. Okay. A guy who many times didn't have opportunities because older guys were still in front of me, and promoters can't help but book them. At some point as a wrestler, you gotta do the right thing because promoters are going to get paid.
Right.
They're going to do what it takes to get paid. And again, I just don't agree with it. Put them in the announcer booth, make them honorary, make them an honorary team to go with a young team to help build them up.
Sure.
But to put them at the pinnacle of as world champions at 60 years old, just like when Ricky Morton was the world champion, the world junior heavyweight champion at 50 something years old. No one's saying that Ricky and Robert can't go and they can't still fight, and they can't still wrestle. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is that there are tons of wrestlers that are scratching their claws to have an opportunity to make their way in the industry. And these guys could do so much more by helping them get somewhere, by using their celebrity for them, than going out there. If I'm 60 years old and the promoter comes to me and says, hey, we want to put the straps on you, I'm going to say no. Why would I do that?
Right. And
again, I think that's just, in no offense, like, to me, maybe it's an integrity thing. Maybe I don't get it, but as a fan and as a wrestler, I see that and I go, okay, I know what's going to happen. The work in the ring was shoddy. It wasn't good work. The drop kicks weren't great. The shoulder tackles weren't crisp. I mean, it just isn't believable. Watching it's not believable. And the two guys that the wild card, they're not my favorite guys in the world, but They should never have lost that match.
So
never.
So
that's that. Let me have a minute. Let me breathe.
Okay, now let me ask you a couple questions because
sure,
I'm a lifelong wrestling fan, and there's some things that kind of, there's a paradox here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're saying, I don't disagree with, but I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I'm going to point out a few things, and I'll get your take on it. Because one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, and I don't think I've ever said this on the show, was in the AWA, Nick Bockwinkel.
Sure.
You remember Nick Bockwinkel?
Of course I do.
Cut the best promo in the business. You ask him to tell you the time, and he'd tell you how to build a watch. And he'd get in there and wrestle a match well past his prime and could still have a wonderful match. What would you say to people who say, well, Bockwinkel did it? What's wrong with the Rock and Roll Express doing it?
Well, and I don't think it was necessarily right, because how good did the AWA turn out?
Good point.
I'm just saying.
Sure.
Look at WWE again, is the standard bearer for professional wrestling. You can hate on them all day long, but ain't nobody. Hey, the Rock and Roll Express took their Hall of Fame rings, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay. And say what you want. It's so easy to hate on quote unquote hate on the big dog. But the truth is, and I do like Roman Reigns. Sorry, hate me all you want, but he's a legit athlete. He's one of the few guys out there that you're not going to go and tell him to your face that you think he sucks. But I'm just telling you, you won't.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, you know, in WWE gets it, and I think in the 90s, you really saw that they paid the price financially for letting the Hogans and the Macho Mans and those guys go, so that they could make room for young talent. That's why we had a Shawn Michaels. That's why we had a Mick Foley. That's why we had some of these guys in the 90s, Bret Hart,
sure,
Mr. Perfect. These guys don't happen if Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and those older guys are clogging the lane.
Now
it doesn't happen.
Now I'm still playing devil's advocate here, because everything you're saying, I don't disagree with.
Sure.
Now let's talk about Terry Funk. The guy retired more times than anybody, wrestled well into his late 60s. Hell, his brother's still wrestling in Japan about once a year.
And there's nothing wrong with the older guys wrestling. Nothing, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. You know, the Undertaker still is a novelty.
Sure.
But when's the last time he won the WWE Championship?
Fair enough.
When was the last time you saw one of these older guys not be a novelty? I'm not saying, like I said, I never said there's anything wrong with them making appearances. You know, a couple old guys going out there and fighting it out, like, that's fine. But, you know, to have a prime spot, you know, a mainline spot go to someone like that, whether it's in singles competition, tag competition, you're just not going to get me to agree with it. Again, I'm not saying, you know, like even for me, Goldberg is a stretch.
Yeah.
And Goldberg can still whoop some, you know, it still looks the part.
Absolutely. No,
and is believable. I mean, he's believable. But even him, he's a stretch for me.
And again, I'm playing devil's advocate because I don't have the strong stance that you have.
Yeah.
And I've always said, people with wrestling, there is a million different flavors. Everyone enjoy what you want.
Sure.
But I kind of like pushing your buttons on this issue because I know it's important to you. But like, you brought up Mankind, Mick Foley. Yeah. In fact, I have him here on my book right here. He teamed up with Terry Funk as Chainsaw Charlie, and they were actually challenging the New Age Outlaws for the tag titles.
Yeah.
I don't remember if they ever won them, but the WWE kind of contradicted what you just said by doing that. And then later this guy up here, you know, I'm pointing. I don't know if you actually watch the show after we do it, but on my little set here, I have a AWA Remco action figure, Ric Flair holding the 10 pounds of gold. That guy teamed up with Roddy Piper to win the tag titles well after he should have been done wrestling. And so, like, you know, when we talk about that and we talk about everything we just kind of said there, and we talked about Muta earlier, and I think you also have to kind of bring up, you know, Inoki and Chono and a lot of these guys, they hung on way past their prime and were legitimate challengers for championship gold. Why is this different?
Well, I think, again, there's nothing wrong with those guys wrestling, you know, especially each other.
Right.
And again, there's nothing wrong with, like, again, in Japan, they do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have the old guys match. I've seen it, you know, like I've seen it plenty of times.
Right.
And again, I'm not against it. If you're if you're over 40 and you still want to try to relive the glory days, you can't move on in life and you have nothing else going for you, I totally understand. You know, and if you want to collect a paycheck and the promoter's going to throw you out there because they see dollar signs.
Right.
I get all that. But at some point, you know, if you want to have integrity beyond the industry, where people actually outside the industry look in and go, wow, look at Brock Lesnar. That dude would kill anybody anywhere on the planet.
Right. No doubt about it.
That's the guy that should be your champion.
Right.
No one's saying, you know, and I'm not saying that, you know, the Undertaker having a match or wrestle, but what started to happen he really should have lost his last like 4.
Right.
But at some point it's got to stop. At some point, the champions that are in positions to be, you know, the up and comers or the guys that are at their peak physically, athletically, and even in popularity, it's time to pass the torch. And I'm not saying there's not exceptions to the rule.
Sure.
A lot of times I call that selling your soul. You know, you need ratings. Things aren't going well. Maybe you need a what we call a hot shot situation.
Right.
I just don't think this is what the NWA needs at this point, in terms of the Rock and Roll Express. And again, like some of these people you've named, like Mankind was actually at his best
Right.
during the Chainsaw Charlie era, during that era and a little beyond that. That was his best time.
Right.
Now, Terry Funk, I don't think Terry Funk is there without Mankind.
Right.
I don't think without Cactus Jack, Terry Funk even has a job. Or if he does, it's not as a mainline character like that.
Sure.
I believe he was there as a way because they really believed in Mick Foley at that point. He was getting pushed in every angle he was in. And no matter what he put his hands to, it turned to gold. Dude wrestled Steve Austin right after WrestleMania when in one of the largest one of the biggest turning points in wrestling history,
right.
WrestleMania 14. The next feud after that was Dude Love.
Right.
And again, I think you're catching Mick Foley there at the downswing. He's on his way down, but sometimes that's when wrestlers are at their most entertaining. But again, you didn't see a dominant champion like you did with Steve Austin or The Rock,
right?
When they're in their prime, they're hitting their stride, and they're wrestlers in their prime. I agree more with that than I do with the outliers, which would be the minority situation of every so often older guy that. Man, I'm sorry, but older guys are going to still be popular.
Yeah.
Does not popularity in wrestling should not justify a championship. Period. That's just my thing. Again, that popularity can be used to bring light to younger stars that people may have never seen before,
right?
And can get a look at the next generation, and you use that to help further the business. You don't use that to to carry on your glory days or expand your own legacy, which you already have. Like, no one doubts that the Rock and Roll Express is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, tag team of all time. Mm-hmm. They have nothing left to prove. They're in the Hall of Fame. So again, and again, sure, maybe it would be, and anytime you start a sentence with, it would be cool if, be very careful about what you say next, because a lot of things would be cool, but it may not be sensible. Maybe it would be cool if they won a title in 5 decades. But you know what? Why not? Like, let's take their when they both roll over and die. Let's take their corpses out and let's roll them across and have them win in six decades. I mean, again, that might be cool. But in all reality, at some point that kind of stuff needs to stop. And maybe I'm getting a little far fetched, but entertainment is part of what we're here for. And again, I want to say one thing.
Sure.
Anybody listening, I respect professional wrestling.
Right.
I respect I love it. I paid the ultimate price. If you haven't ever gotten in the ring and you haven't taken 10,000 falls on your back on concrete or plywood or any of the stuff that I had to go through, had your face broken or bones broken or concussions or any of that stuff, you have no opinion, in my opinion. So just keep your mouth shut. But if you are a wrestler and you are listening to this and I have hurt your feelings, it doesn't mean I don't respect what they do.
Right.
That they can't do it anymore. But I just think there's a point where you draw the line. You say, okay, we're using these guys as celebrities, but they're not going to run with the banner of our company.
Well, and again, I was pushing your buttons because I know you have some pent up promo aggression, and I wanted to let you have an opportunity to get that out. With that being said, we got Eddie Kingston and Homicide sitting there backstage. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And the Rock and Roll Express, as much as everyone gets caught up in it, let's again, if we're looking at wins and losses, if we're treating this like a professional wrestling company, wins and losses, they have a no decision at the Crockett Cup with the Briscoe brothers. Again, maybe a match they shouldn't have been involved with. Then we come to we come to Power, and they're getting a title match. Now I get it because the wild card did beat the Dawsons, and the wild card did beat the Outlaw Inc., Homicide, and Kingston. There aren't a lot of tag teams left. But again, I even feel, because again, you and I don't exactly see eye to eye on this situation, but I feel like if you were going to do that, you should have had a match that built the Rock and Roll up to get that opportunity. I felt like it was something that was gifted to him and something that probably, again, if you're going to do it, but do it the right way. But man, can you believe we've been talking for over an hour now?
Oh yeah, yeah, and you probably have to edit this show down. And like I said, I love professional wrestling. A lot of people that love the Rock and Roll Express, especially people that grew up watching them.
Yeah.
Or some of the other wrestlers that I've mentioned might get a little butt hurt by it. But like I said, if you've actually got in the ring and had 1,500 plus matches like I have,
right,
have actually been there and done something and paid some dues, I'll listen to your opinion and I'll respect it. I may not agree with you.
Sure.
And even in your case, Jay, it's not that I don't respect your opinion. I think you know that.
Yeah.
And in fact, and again, we've known each other for a long time now.
10 years.
Yeah, for a decade. And again, it's not that I don't feel like someone has a right to their opinion, but it's just to me, it's something that was always a peeve, even when I got into wrestling.
Right.
Before I knew anything about anything, I said, I don't want to be one of those 40-plus-year-old guys still trying to hang on.
Right.
When it's time to go, it's going to be time to go. I want to go out as close to my prime as possible because I don't want to set an example and be the guy that I don't want to be the guy that held me back.
Right.
And the best thing I felt like I could do was get out of the way and open the door for a Ricky Starks. For somebody of that nature. And again, I'm not trying to say I opened the door for Ricky. No. I made a way for him. But guys like that are the guys that should be getting the opportunities, that should be, wrestling the Colt Cabanas and having the big matches, having the stage and having the opportunity. Again, didn't Colt and Ricky, they were a tag team. There's a good win-loss there too, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. There was a lot of things they could have done that they didn't do.
Sure. And again, like I said, I don't want to harp too much on it, but I did want to give my 2 cents on it. And
for sure.
And I probably will again at some point, because I'm sure this won't be the last time something like this happens.
So that's going to wrap it up for us this week, because honestly, I think my battery's about to die. I've got a 12-hour battery on this laptop, and I think it's got every little bit left of it. Kevin, I'm not sure if we're going to do a show next week, buddy, because there is no show next week. If we do it, it'll just be a Talk NWA riff where there's no show to review. But how can people follow you on social media, Kevin? If people want to reach out to you and tell you that you're wrong about the Rock and Roll Express, how can they do it?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Kevin Lee Frazier. That's, as we'd say in wrestling, that's my shoot name. But that's how you can find me online. As far as YouTube channel, I do have a YouTube channel. It's just Kevin247. And I also do have a wrestling channel from back in the day, Kevin Douglas 247. And you can also find me on Facebook, Kevin L. Frazier. I have a page on there. Again, most of my stuff is inspirational, motivational. I'm a Christian. I'm a licensed minister, so I do talk a little bit about stuff like that, but I'm not going to shove it down your throat. Do love talking wrestling. I do love talking baseball. So yeah, anybody who wants to reach out and talk about anything, or like I said last week, if you're a wrestler, you listen to this show, maybe you're struggling with some of the darker sides of the business. I've had plenty of wrestlers reach out to me since I retired to talk about this sort of thing. Feel free to reach out. My message box is always open. So is my phone, and I don't mind giving out my number to somebody that might be struggling a little bit. I've been there.
And we'll put links to both your YouTube pages on here. We'll put them in the video as well as in the description. So if you guys want to check it out, Kevin's a great guy. Like I said, we've known each other for 10 years. Kevin has always been welcoming and opening to talk about anything. Now, mostly we talk about baseball and wrestling, but Kevin's been there for me when I need to talk about certain things. So please, if you're feeling like you need to talk to someone, don't hesitate to reach out to Kevin Douglas, Kevin Frazier. And that's going to do it. Again, you can follow me at First to Third on Twitter, but you can follow the Alliance at the Alliance blog. We got you covered, baby. We got you on YouTube, Twitch TV. We got you on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're even on Tumblr, if that's still a thing. And we're on TikTok, you millennials. Come check me out. Until next time, guys, we'll see you at the matches. Good night now. Thank you, sir.